Hi everybody, foXnoMad here, and today I want to help you travel smarter. So, have you ever been in an airport and you looked at the escalator and seen it's full of people, and then you look at the stairs right next to the escalator and nobody's using it? Well, I was able to ask this question along with a lot of other questions about movement and our evolutionary past and what we get wrong about exercise in the modern world with Dr. Daniel Lieberman, who's a professor of evolutionary biology at Harvard University. Professor Lieberman is also the author of Exercised, Why Something We Never Evolved to Do is Healthy and Rewarding. And on a recent episode of the foXnoMad podcast, he joined me to talk about what we get wrong about movement, what we get wrong about how our ancestors moved, and what we can do to be healthier in the modern world. It's a fascinating discussion. I think you're going to enjoy this clip very much, but I also encourage you to check out the full episode, which is linked in the description below, and also take a look at Dr. Lieberman's book, also linked in the description below. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Whether you're interested in fitness, movement, evolution, science, I think you're going to find this conversation very fascinating and enlightening as well. Thank you, Professor Lieberman, for joining the podcast. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed your book because it combines two of the things I really love, which is anthropology, especially human evolution, and exercise. And this notion of that we have in the Western world of trying to be more natural, which I think is kind of a fad now. And I think your book touches upon all of those things, and it changed how I think about so many things.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that.
So you start out the book with talking about trudging a treadmill up to Pemja and how that made you realize that we didn't evolve to exercise, which seems kind of counterintuitive, I think, to a lot of people.
Well, actually, it wasn't that event really was really more about my realizing just how absurd treadmills are, and how strange and modern they are. But and that actually happened while I was finishing the book, and I just realized it would be the perfect sort of introduction to the book. No, my kind of a sort of aha moment, if there ever was one, was really before I started the book, when I was interviewing some Tarahumara runners in Mexico and asking them about how they train after having just been at Ironman in Kona, the triathlon championships, which is a pretty incredible endurance race. And I was, talking to these amazing runners, because in this culture, running is a really important act. It's kind of a form of prayer, and they do these long distance runs, and yet nobody trains. And I was asking people how they train, and they said, and one guy, this elderly fellow, asked me, why would anybody run if they didn't have to? and it just, kind of was that one of those little moments where you realize, yeah, okay, yeah, of course, right. Just like reading, exercise, that is, physical activity for the sake of health and fitness, discretionary, voluntary, unnecessary physical activity is a really modern thing. And until recently, nobody really thought about physical activity that way.
Yeah, and it's when you point that out in the book, it made me realize, oh yeah, wait, this is not normal. I mean, what we're doing is going to the gym, if we do go to the gym at all, lifting some heavy weights for the sake of lifting them, it seems weird. And then I would, because in my head I think, well, our ancestors have always been doing this strenuous exercise and lifting and running and fighting bears, or whatever ridiculous stories, but it seems like we're not that different than hunter gatherers in terms of our natural inclination to kind of stay still if we can, to conserve calories, it seems like.
Well, we're the same people. I mean, our lives have changed in almost everywhere on the planet because of agriculture and now in the Industrial Revolution. But deep down, we're all the same, and we all have the same sort of basic fundamental instinct, which is that when it's possible to save energy and to take it easy, we do so, unless it's either necessary or rewarding, right? So people for millions and millions of years, like animals and other species, right? Humans have to be physically active in order to survive, in order to get dinner or avoid being somebody else's dinner, and we are also physically active when it's rewarding, like dancing, to playing, and things like that. But going for I just use the it's a horrible icy day here, so I used an exercise machine in my basement, and I worked out really hard for like 25 minutes. But that's a really weird thing. Nobody did that until recently.
Yeah, because it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense if if getting food is difficult, calories are difficult, we're
That's
sort of
right.
in, why would you burn calories that you don't have to?
Well, it's not only that it doesn't make sense, it's actually a problem, right? Because when calories are limited, you have to make you have to make trade-offs, right? So you can't spend a minute more than once, right? If you spending this minute listening to this podcast is time that you're not spending doing something else that might be valuable. So, and until recently, calories were also limited, like time. And so if you spent a certain amount of calories on unnecessary physical activity, those were calories you didn't spend on taking care of your body or reproducing or growing or all the other things that are really important for natural selection. So so we have to understand that those instincts, those trade-offs, are sort of woven into our biology. And so even so the example I like to give is, imagine you're in a subway stop or in a mall or an airport, and you see one of those escalators next to a stairway, right? Of course, there were no escalators in the Stone Age, but that little voice inside of you says, take the escalator, right? And that's because it's normal to to not do unnecessary physical activity. And sometimes our rational part of our brain takes over and says, no, 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 you're better off taking the stairs. But that's a modern choice that we have to make that people didn't used to have to make.
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing that we're not all that we can survive in the modern world. And after reading your book, I sort of think like it's it's in a way amazing that we don't all just balloon up with how many calories that we can get access to.
Well, we do actually. About 2/3 of Americans are either overweight or obese. So, and that's part of that's it's much of that is diet, not exercise, but exercise plays a role in that for sure.
And speaking about diet, you talk about this hunt that you joined. I don't recall quite which group you were with, but it was an unsuccessful hunt for antelope or elk or some sort of meat. And then the hunters just ended up eating. They just went and found honey beehives and just smoked out the bees and ate a whole bunch of honey.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, sugar we're told is bad. So this seems counterintuitive to me. I mean, obviously, in that situation, it's different, but it just makes me think that, you know, how does that balance with the things that we're sort of told? Like, if this seems to be the norm,
Well, one of the silly things about the paleo diet is this idea that somehow whatever our ancestors did must be optimal for us. And I use the word optimal with quotes around it because optimality is actually a very difficult thing to define. But anyway, and again, the only thing that natural selection cares about, what's optimal from natural selection's perspective, is how many offspring you have, right? So more energy means more offspring. That's the equation of life: food in, babies out, right? And so hunter gatherers, their favorite food is honey. They don't, because that's the only really sweet thing they get, right? And they can't go to the corner store and buy, Mars bars or donuts or whatever it is that sweet things that you might like. And so honey is it. And so they'll eat ridiculous quantities of honey when they can get their hands on it. They're also very physically active, and the rest of their diet is generally extremely healthy. So it's not really a problem. But again, they're not thinking about, gee, I want to avoid getting diabetes. They're just like, they want calories, and they're working hard to get them. And we inherit those same cravings. Those same, sugar is a very addictive substance, and you develop a taste for it in utero, and children love sugar and adults love sugar. We all love sugar. The only difference is that now we live in a world where we've made it hyper abundant, right? We actually pay extra money to have sugar removed from foods that has previously, would otherwise be added. So yeah, so it's part of this just sort of paleo fantasy thinking that just because our ancestors did something, it must be good for us. The other part of the paleo fantasy thinking is sort of what our ancestors actually did, right? That they never sat in chairs. They worked hard all day long. They were, jacked like, Arnold Schwarzenegger because they were lifting, huge rocks over their heads, I mean, there's a lot of very, just kind of almost comic book like thinking about the Stone Age, which is part of what I was trying to, some of the myths that I was trying to sort of debunk in the book.